Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, David, or good afternoon, whatever time you're at, and very likewise excited to be joining you.
Yeah, we have the same time zone as Australia, similar time zones. Australia is an adopted member of Asia, right?
That's correct, yeah.
I understand. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, your journey to founding the Orgy Food? Is it correct to pronounce your name, company name?
Orgy yes, Orgy Foods. Orgy Foods. Yeah, so my background, I'm originally from Germany, Czech Republic, came to Australia 12 years ago, initially back then for a Swiss multinational working in consumer products as a CEO, and soon realized or changed a global career to become a full-time entrepreneur, and have so far started two businesses, one of them in the consumer internet space, in the pet space, which is now listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, where I'm chairman, the second one, a fintech, where the biggest investor is the second largest bank in Australia, where I'm also now only a shareholder. And Orgy Foods is really something that I intend to make equivalent of an ASX 100. So from a valuation perspective, at least $10 billion business, because the market is global. And ultimately, we're in alternative proteins. So think meat version 2.0 and dairy version 2.0.
Yeah, very interesting positioning. And so more than unicorn is not the plan, right?
We will be unicorn very soon.
so unicorn is just next milestone then, right?
Unicorn, I think we'll get there in 3 years, maybe earlier.
Yes, I want to have another interview that when you become the unicorn. Yeah. So what problem are you solving now? I understand at a high level your business model focus on alternative meat, right? So what problem are you solving now?
Yeah, so look, every 25 to 30 years, planet Earth doubles demand for proteins. And that's been the case for the last 100 years. Every 25 to 30 years, we suddenly have twice the amount of demand for protein, and that's mainly driven by simply more people on the planet. We're heading towards 10 billion, as opposed to 7 billion today, as well as driven by a higher socioeconomic positioning, where simply more people, as they have a better lifestyle, want to have more proteins. And so the problem that we're solving in its kind of simplistic way is it is not sustainable for the planet, simply driven from climate change, limitation of resources, water, land, deforestation, that we're going to double animal agriculture in terms of we're just going to double the amount of cows that give us meat or that give us milk. So that's in essence what we're solving, to provide additional supply of proteins that we have, meat and dairy that we like, without having to compromise on taste, texture, any other consumer perceptions. In fact, I dare to say we're going to make it better than what you have today.
Got you. So can you tell us a little bit about your business model, how your business model works step by step?
Yeah. So we're a designer and manufacturer, co-manufacturer of those unique products, and as well as create the marketing and the brand positioning. And it sounds easy, but it's not, because if it was easy, then everybody could do it. It is a highly sophisticated, pretty challenging science behind it to replicate exact meat or exact dairy structure. So we employ lots of very, very smart PhDs, a team that we have assembled globally from multiple countries that really come up with prototypes of meat analogs or exact DNA identical dairy products. We develop those products and then we sell them through, in its simplicity, two main channels. One is retail. So we go to the big retail grocery stores and they sell it to consumers. And the second main channel is basically food service, so restaurants, cafes, hotels, and so on. And that's, in essence, that's the business model.
Got it. I recently posted a couple of writing about the meat alternative, because I came to very interested about the meat alternative business, because that's could be a huge solution. But since this is the initial stage, also business started from US, they're dealing with a different consumer group, right? I can imagine it's a consumer and dietary in US and Europe are different from Asia, right? So I read many articles around this topic, and they talk about the product of Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat they are still focused on the product development, right? They try to provide a solution in terms of product development. For example, hamburger patty and then sausage, but Asian has a very different dietary. And then also is they provide a solution in terms of engineering, but consumer, at the end of the day, consumer will pay money and then purchase this product again and again based on their taste and satisfaction, flavor, right? Something like that, more complicated value propositioning. So do you have any comment about these issues and pointed out by a lot of consumer and then food consultant?
Yeah. So I think it's look, there's a two-way angle, right? Like first is we certainly want to have, and equally in Impossible Foods, a certain underlying science, how you create the unique replicable meat structures or unique same dairy products, right? So this is science that applies to every country in the world. But I think the very, very important thing is, and so far we're live in Australia, but Asia is our number one priority, and we will be in Asia next year, is you need to tailor for local tastes. You know, because the Chinese consumer is different than the Korean consumer, and again, the South Korean consumer might be different from the Thai consumer, and the Thai consumer might be different from the Indonesian consumer. So there's nothing like one Asia. There's nothing like one beef burger that the American consumer might like. You know, it might be a good trial, a good one-off for the Asian consumer, but you're not making it part of your regular diet. So that's why, you know, how we're gonna set ourselves up is we will have local R&D teams in China, in Singapore, who will translate those unique local tastes and requirements, and sometimes even differences in branding, right? Because the reasons why you might choose something is the main motivation might be different in Australia than it might be in China, where we leverage the underlying science, but we still customize for local requirements. That's how we'll be set up.
Got you. And another controversy is that because as you mentioned, is this idea business model started based on the meat is not cattle, and then the poultry is not sustainable, right? And then also it's maybe not good for the health, right? And then came up with this alternative solution. But there is also controversy is that the meat substitute with the meaty tasty, not very healthy. Not very healthy. There is controversy. What is your comment about that?
Yeah, and I look, some of them might not be the healthiest. 100% agree with you, right? So that's where, again, it's all about the trade-off. We tried to come up with products, and in fact, it's an independent body rated us as a 4-star health rating out of 1 to 5. I think that's pretty good, right? Like the question is, what's the health rating of any normal meat, normal burger? Would you get a 4-star health rating? Probably not.
Yep.
Could we get a 5-star health rating? Yes, we could. But then it would be at the expense of some of the unique tastes and textures. So we got to find that right compromise between it is on one hand an amazing taste and textures, and 95% of people, the reaction they say is, I can't believe this is not meat. You fueled me. You gave me real meat and told me that's your product. So that's one reaction what you want to have. But I think the health aspect, particularly more and more in the future, as this category will become more and more mainstream, I think will be more and more important as you know, still today, the category is 1% of proteins. It's very, very small. It's very niche. It's very, very tiny. But once we'll have 5, 10, 15% market share, I think the health aspect will be more and more important. So we're trying to cater for both.
Yeah, I agree. If the business try to solve all the market segmentation, customer segmentation, you will fail, right? Right. You need to address some consumer who focus on the flavor and taste, and some other people are concerned about the health issues and vegetarian and something like that. I agree. So you explained a little bit before when you have a private chat, you talk about the different product offering as compared to the early days meat alternative business, Impossible Food and the Beyond the Meat. So can you explain a little bit about your unique offering and then business?
Sure. So we also have a version of the like Beyond Meat as a burger. So we have a burger. It's very popular in Australia, as you can imagine. But look, we're developing different Asian versions of dumplings, versions of pork, versions of chicken, potentially versions again of very unique Asian products. But these would be the 3 to launch for, right? Where we have version of pork, chicken and different meat-filled dumplings. But I think the main kind of really, some companies have that, what we have. The main where we will be absolutely unique is probably, I'd like to think, first company in the world, is we will have identical milk. We're not speaking almond milk, not speaking soy milk, not speaking plant-based milk, but we're speaking identical milk. You might know the Australian brand name A2, so A2 milk, without the cow.
That sounds very interesting. What is
correct?
That?
So we basically take the genome of a cow, and we create milk through a technology called precision fermentation, which has been used in the past mainly in pharmaceuticals. When you want to scale up a vaccine, you develop a small quantum of the vaccine in the lab, but how do you then scale it up that you get COVID vaccinations around the world? And that's exactly what we're doing. And we can make A2 milk, we can make it potentially lactose-free, because for 90% of people, particularly in Asia, lactose is not preferred. So we can make identical milk, and once we have identical milk, we can of course make also identical cheese entirely without the cow. And once we launch that, to the best of our belief, unless somebody beats us, and that's how I'm so confident that will be a very valuable business, because we have the tech and the science, and we're lodging the patents, that will be a very valuable company. So we should be the first company in the world to have that.
Yeah, that sounds like exciting news, right? Also,
thank you.
Feels like a meat alternative 2.0, right? 2.0.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Okay. I understand the entrepreneur, founder of the startup is one of the biggest challenges is fundraising and finding right talent, right? Everybody say that. I already interviewed more than 100 entrepreneurs around the world. Everybody talk about that. I thought it's a fundraising, but they say that for startup, since you are not running Apple, IBM, or whatever, Google, it's very difficult to find, highly talented and who has the right skill for your business model. So I want to ask about, especially you're running a very interesting, new business model. So can you tell us a little bit about your fundraising experience then?
Sure.
They all say that it is a great idea. They are all excited, and then this make a decision to invest. Tell me the little bit of an interesting story.
Yeah, no, look, so I've done, this is my third business. Obviously, the more times you do it, the better you become at fundraising, as well as creating an exceptional team. So we raised the money pretty quickly, and we raised $16 million as a seed round. So it was one of the largest Australian seed rounds. And that's just for a start, right? We were not even doing revenues back then, and we had some very, very high level backers. Some of the richest families in Australia. We had the largest green bank in the world invest. It's a green bank that overlooks a $10 billion portfolio, invest in clean tech businesses who are tasked to decarbonize the Australian economy. So it's on behalf of the Australian government. They were our lead investor. And then we had 2 or 3 venture capital funds, again, very, very high profile. So we put together an amazing register that is not only good for this round, but for more rounds in the future. Now, next year, we aim to raise significantly more money than this. And then also we'll be looking into Asia to have preferably some Asian institutional investors as we plan to scale in Asia to come on the register. Preferably, again, some of those that could help us within the ecosystem of food retail technology. So that's on fundraising. And look, on talent, I agree, it tends to be difficult, but I think we have such a huge vision and so many amazing backers, as well as an amazing product, where it honestly didn't have we recruited whoever we wanted to recruit. And it was always, of course, a big selling process, but I said, I want to have the absolutely best technology people in the country. And we did get them, right? And yes, they have an equity stake in the company, which I'm very, very happy to do, because I want them to think like they're company owners, which they are. And if you have the best brains in the country, to develop that unique science, I think it only makes the company more valuable, and everybody wins.
Got it. When I ask this question, I intend to find out some interesting backstory. But sounds like the journey for fundraising and finding right talent too smooth, not interesting at all.
No, look, there's always, of course, it's not done in a day. Of course, it's a lot of hours of hard work and sometimes rejections and sometimes surprising quick conclusions. So that's all part of the journey, right? But I guess I'm judging myself about the end result. That the end result has been very positive.
Okay, good, very good. Yeah. So, what do you think biggest challenge in scaling your business? Because this is new business model. I mean, recently emerged in the market. So, what is the biggest challenge in scaling your business?
Yeah, so I think it's look. I'd say there's two angles. One is obviously it's consumer adoption, right? I'd compare us to think electric cars 10 years ago. It was absolute niche.
Yes.
Right. Today it's less niche, but it's still relatively small. Think 100 years ago, the first cars replacing horses. It was very high and unique and so on as a transport technology when machines replaced animals. And I think in 10 years, this will be very mainstream and very accepted. Today, it's still perceived as a very niche. You wouldn't integrate it in your mainstream diet. So I think that's something that not only us are battling with, but really everybody in the industry. I think the answer is to make it so good, indistinguishable, potentially better than animal protein that people basically vote with their mouth and with their taste buds. As well as making it healthy, as well as making it from a cost perspective not prohibitive. So that's a process, right? You won't get there. The first cars were not cheaper than horses, and the first electric cars were not cheaper than petrol cars. So that of course is a process. I think that's one thing, and the second thing is obviously in terms of creating a global food business. The way how you do supply chain, where you manufacture it. Yes, we now are manufacturing in Australia, but that's clearly we must have a manufacturing partner or our own manufacturing plant in Asia, in China, so that we simply are competitive in terms of local sourcing and supply, right? So we will export the unique patents and the IP and the black box that nobody knows what it is, but then we'll make it a final product closer to where we sell that. And that as such is not done quickly, right? You need to raise money for that. You need to build those factories. You need to find the right people. You need to make them operationally efficient, and that might take a few years.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I think it's need to change the behavior of consumer to adopt and accept the new product, right? Yeah.
Correct. And we don't try to be preachy. We don't try to tell people what to do. I think it's a mistake, right? A lot of the companies are trying preaching or do the marketing, doing the hard. I mean, the sales are very hard. Actually, it triggered defense system of consumer, right? Exactly. So we actually make fun of ourselves and we say, you won't believe it's not meat, and many different challenges that we're thinking of creating as campaigns.
Right. I these days I have a Korean background. I see the unbelievable success of the record-breaking success of Squid Game these days. Also the Korean food, K-pop music. I cannot explain logically. Actually, they had the same content 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, but no non-Korean consumer or people didn't accept it. But now is that they are ready to accept, and then they become a huge fan, right? So that's a very interesting thing. We cannot plan everything. Yeah,
I agree.
Yes. So what do you have on top of your mind for the next step?
For the next pardon? For the next.
What is your next step for your business?
Yeah.
And then
look, we launched in Australia 3 months ago. It's going really well. We're already now planning how and where exactly in Asia we will launch. We're in fact speaking to some people who would be our local management team in China, in Singapore. We want to have an R&D center in Singapore. We want to work with Temasek as well as a technology hub accelerator. So we want to have a proper setup in Asia. And then there's a lot of things that come with that, right? We just want to customize the product, for Asian consumers, still while retaining retaining the IP in Australia, and still while eventually positioning ourselves as an Australian company, because I think it comes as a certain a premium. There's a lot of cases where like Australian food and beverage is perceived well in Asia. So yeah, that I think will occupy us really a lot over the next 2 or 3 years, because the market is huge, right? And then equally with that, we of course we want to continuously extend the range of products, right? Like if you think meat and dairy, there's hundreds and hundreds of different cheeses and types of meat. So again, in the world of infinite capital, you'd be doing everything, but we don't have infinite capital. So we need to pick the right choices where we have a good proposition, a unique product, and where it also will be market appealing. And that's what we'll be doing over the next few years.
Yes, sounds like a great plan. And I heard, I read that some of the food consultant mention about, I mean, in terms of taste of the meat alternative, he mentioned that as compared to large US company like Impossible Food and Beyond Food, he mentioned that meat alternative from the Australian startup and Chinese startup better taste. What do you think
That's
about
great
that?
to hear.
What do you think about that?
I won't disagree.
Yeah, you're in a position
disagree.
not. Yeah, you cannot disagree.
I won't disagree. But I also look. I want to be fair. Taste is highly subjective.
Right.
Right.
That's
it's
correct.
You really have to take.
We cannot argue about that, right?
Yeah. It is like, what's the better car, BMW or Mercedes?
Or the French wine, right? French wine.
Correct.
French wine, super expensive. I love Australia. I love Australian wine better than French, in fact, personally.
But that's you, and of course now if a French person was in the room,
I don't want to argue.
Disagree. so taste is highly subjective, like many consumer products, and so we say, okay, if we have a 60% preference, 60 versus 40%, then that's a great success. And we had a 60-40% preference versus Beyond Meat, which is the global #1 and market leader, with Australian and Asian consumers. It could be that in the US, this is not the case. It could be that in the US, Beyond Meat has a preference over us. We haven't done that consumer independent tasting in the US because we're not yet, or don't plan to be for quite a while in the American market. But yeah, the it's great to hear. You know, we've had the same feedback from Australian and Asian consumers, and that's our main priority.
Yeah.
But again, as I say, it is always to a certain extent, it's a highly, I think there's a minimum threshold that you need to meet, right? Obviously, a car manufactured by BMW in 2021 probably will be certainly better than a Ford manufactured 20 years ago. That's a no-brainer. But if you take similarly positioned two premium brands in the same year, it becomes a very subjective debate about, you know, which is driven by our own deepest beliefs and biases.
Biases as well. Biases. Yeah. Also, that I feel that the Asian and more sensitive taste, right? More sensitive taste because we use a lot of sauce and spice.
Correct.
The European, American, probably the consumer there, they don't really care about the sophisticated taste. Is meat, right? Right.
Yeah, that's. I'm afraid it's not such an easy answer to that. It's always highly. And look, we've done lots of consumer insights. We've given the product to 100 people, and we've then done a word cloud. How would you make the product better? And you get from the very same feedback, you get 10 people, it should be more spicy. But equally you get 10 people, it should be less spicy. What do you do, right? Yes. So you always gotta try to be in the middle so that you appeal to the 60-70% of people in the middle, and it comes to trade-offs, right?
Yeah, I agree. Don't need to define, right? Don't need to try to find the answer for that. Just follow the consumer.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking time to introducing the interesting, exciting, ambitious your entrepreneur journey.
Thank you, David, very much, and all the best to your listeners. And we'll speak once we'll be north of $1 billion valuation, which will be very soon.
Yes. Maybe before that I can do when you move to the next milestone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, David.